Good afternoon, beloveds. Welcome to Wisdom Wednesday here at the Amused Woman Studios. And I wanted to talk about, and I have been talking about, bringing visions into form and discerning what seeds. I use the metaphor of the garden very frequently because we can all relate to it and because it operates within seasons. And that's how it flourishes and gets nourished. So, and as do your dreams and your visions. So we just on Monday celebrated Imbolc in the Celtic traditions. And of course, there's seasonal celebrations at this midwinter point all throughout the world, at least those of us in the Northern Hemisphere who are moving halfway between winter and spring. And what is happening is the seeds are beginning to wake up under the soil, but they're still in the dark and you can't see the results of them yet. You can't see the sprouts yet. But rest assured they're being nourished and that sunlight's just starting to peek in. I've begun to markedly notice more daylight that we have. And so I really wanted to impress upon you that now is the time to really discern what what seeds, what visions, what dreams, what grace you're bringing into form or want to bring into form from now, and really put some energy into through summer solstice really, and then we begin to harvest those, or if they're long term they get to be harvested the following year. And there is no, as you know, I don't follow a Gregorian calendar cycle for the things I do in my life. I tend to be much more flow and fluidity, and there's often no rush. And that is why I encourage you to spend so much time in that darkness in the visioning phase, because that's really where we get all of the really good nourishing information. And some of you I know are, you're in it, you're already doing the things, and that's okay. We all work in different harmonies and different patterns, but you can still overlay and continue to discern and choose and change your mind as time goes on. For example, many of us want to have that word of the year figured out by January 1st or what have you. And for me, I had some words. They were coming through, many words. In fact, I have a really hard time choosing one word or one essence. And I'm finding different words that really are impacting, like there's sort of the overall umbrella and arc. And then there's words that really are specific to certain areas of my life and energies. And yet they all make a whole. And um, but I play with those words. I be with those words. I'm not stuck with that word because I chose it on January 1st. And so even just today, because I'm going into ceremony on Friday to really begin to emerge with this vision for the year, both sort of in the mystical realms and in the material realms, and what I want to do in work and in my life and in my relationships, and look at it holistically, and then sort of look at it individually, and then look at what the aligned actions are. But when we plant way too many seeds, those of you who gardeners know, especially if you garden from seed all the way through to harvest, is you usually put a bunch of seeds in the soil, and then as they start to sprout, there's often too many and you have to thin them. Because if you don't, you're going to have a whole bunch of spindly little plants that don't actually produce anything, and they're taking up too much energy and nourishment from the soil and from the sun. And so you thin those seeds and you choose the strongest and most potent to nourish and to focus on, so that they become beautiful, robust plants that produce a lot of fruit or veggie, whichever you choose. And that is really what I'm asking you to do here. So you may be in a place where you have a whole ton of seeds, ideas floating around, or you may be in a place where they haven't come through for you yet. And that's okay as well. They may not become visible to you until they come up from the earth, from the ground. And so it's okay to continue to be patient and spend time with that. Like I said, today, well, over the last several days, I've got new words coming in. I've got a new, the power mantra, the symbols. I'd start taking it through a teaching with one of my mentors, Christine, to really bring it into its essence. And I've got stuff that's all related. And now I'm weaving the web between all of those things. And so I wanted to read you a passage which may or may not seem as usual, like it makes sense or weaves into this conversation, but it does, I assure you. So today is a passage from Mirabai Star and Wild Mercy, not a card, because this I read this every once in a while, and it always touches me so deeply. And it well, when I read it, you'll understand we're really discerning what the most important seed is, and that is you and your sacredness, and everything else is just an aside and a way of walking through the world. And you'll understand what I mean as I read this and as I go through it. Be with it so that you begin to understand what seeds are of most importance to you. Ever since you first tasted the elixir of nobodiness, maybe in the midst of meditating or grieving, you have lost your hunger for somebodyness. Mainstream culture conditioned you to construct a persona and defend it with all of your might. The endless self-improvement project, fueled by self-loathing and foiled by the realities of the human condition, has only reinforced the illusion that you are separate from the source. But a combination of spiritual practice and tragic losses ended that game. You, for one, are relieved to surrender. So how would it feel that those seeds maybe don't include any big self-improvement project that comes from a place of being less than or not enough or separate from the rest of the world or egoic or that you have to prove yourself to others? That's a biggie that I'm and myself that I'm letting go of. So we're still always in a let go process as well. Which seeds are you going to thin out? Your surrender is invisible. You still go through the motions of promoting your work on social media. You make an effort to limit your carbs, practice yoga, pick out interesting things to wear. But that's not because you actually identify as an individual being, detached from all other beings or from the earth or from the Holy One. You have come to understand that a functioning ego is a necessary vessel for an incarnate soul. You don't regard your ego as a problem. You just don't take it seriously. And that is a big part of my work. After all, I am the amused woman, which used to piss your ego off given its self-important nature, but she's getting used to it. When you were young and you recognized ultimate reality as beloved and you developed a powerful crush, over the decades, your roles reversed and reversed again. You were the seeker, you were the sought. Eventually, in moments of deep stillness or unbearable anguish, lover and beloved melded. Only love remained. The state of suchness looks like emptiness, but felt like plenitude. You came to understand that not only have you been connected to your beloved all along, but you are that which you have been seeking. I'll say that again. You are that which you have been seeking. You had expected God to be the prize you would collect after all the hard work of seeking God. It turns out that the object you thought of as you does not exist, which means the subject you called God is not real either. You would have anticipated such an insight to be devastating, but it isn't. It's amusing. Chuckling at the cosmic joke, you get on with business. There are temples to build, curricula to develop, sonatas to compose, startups to start up. You did not buy your equanimity cheaply. Frequent flyer storms eradicated your opinion on the matter. Multiple meltdowns led you to a place where your only option was to melt. Who knew that dissolving would be so sweet? So I read all that to say that when we're in the deepest love with ourselves and our divines, that is what is of most importance. But the paradox of that is the paradox of walking with grace through the world and looking at our seeds to see first if they're serving us and then to see if we're serving the collective, is that in that paradox, yes, we are starting up the startups, we are creating the curriculum, we are designing the yoga class, we are making the painting, but it's through those seeds of grace and deep love that we want to bring that out into the world, and letting go of the more, let's say, mundane personas or the worrying about, like here I am on social media, and she joked about that, but it's to share from a place of generosity in hopes that we all elevate our gifts and really focus on those seeds that are of the utmost importance to us. And, I thought about myself this time last year. And my mantra of keep it simple, or my power mantra of keep it simple, make it mythic. I knew this before we were forced to keep it simple. I was forced to thin out the seeds. And even though I teach these things every year, I mean, even still now, I got it up there. Look at it all. But it's meant for spaciousness, and I'm pulling stuff off and moving it around. Nothing has been what I would call finalized yet. Some things are in motion, but other things I'm still sitting with. And I'm looking at what energy, how much will it take to nourish? And is it of the utmost importance for me, to myself and my love relationships and my divine relationships, and then outward from there? And asking the questions of, how does this serve? And how much energy is this one of these things going to take? But I come out of the darkness, if you will, with all the dream seeds and really excited about a lot of things. And I have to look and say, okay, is this really all going to be needed to bring into form this year? And so, now that we're almost a year into a global pandemic, we're all in different spaces and places with the safety of that and what our work looks like in that new model. And I know there's some of us who are looking at, people getting vaccinated and numbers dropping and restaurants opening and so on, and saying, "Oh, we're going back to normal. Finally, I can come out." And immediately go back into the overwhelm and the overdoing. And I'm like, why? Did we not learn that that is not necessary in this last year? And so be with that. Be with making sure that you have taken some of those gifts of what we have just collectively been through and are still in to some degree, realizing that the normal we had before is not going to be what the normal is going forward, whatever that looks like. Who knows? We're in the mystery still. And so, even knowing that, the story of having to have a lot of things, balls in the air and things in action and expansion and doing all this stuff in the business, go back to it every single year. And every single year, I have to discern and say, no, but the truth is this, and this is enough. And I need one seed pretty much per area of my life with an overarching seed, which for me this year is ease and grace. It was originally the words coming through was refinement and reverence. And those still, I treat everything with reverence. So that is just already a part of who I am. The refinement really is as it relates to my work. And overarching, though, is why would I not support the seeds that come with ease and grace? And if they don't, say, no, maybe not right now. So that for me is perhaps the theme I will land on for the year. I'm not even sure. Although the synchronicities, the symbols, they're all beginning to show up now, and it is appearing in my work. Um, because while we go through this process, it doesn't mean we stop work or we do nothing, but we slow it down a little bit and we pay attention to see if what we're doing in the day-to-day realm is in support of the vision, whether those visions and dreams are older and have been in our space for a while, or if they're newer. And start to, in some ways, recycle has been a word for me. Start to recycle what's important. Recycle, use the compost of what you've already done to nourish those new seeds into form, not necessarily starting all over all the time. And because we have to get down to the truth of what is enough. And one thing I know for sure, and this is also the month of self love, is that me, you, each and every one of us, we're already enough. We already do enough for sure. And so maybe it's taking that enough, or that of what we already do, and adding grace to it, or adding some ingredient that transmutes and transforms what it is we already do, instead of doing a whole bunch of new stuff, particularly if the new stuff is not necessarily um, part of our ease and grace and divinely given gifts and so on. And then that's where, if you have a deep desire to do something, that you may need support structures in place to help your garden grow. So amendments to the soil, if you will, to go back to that metaphor. So, and also honoring the fact that your life, for the most part, for most of us, here in my audience, I know this for sure, that there's hardships. There's women I know in the audience who are going through some health challenges now, personal life challenges for sure. But in many ways, we have good lives. We really do. And so to honor that, what else did I want to say? I think that's really it. But keeping in mind, my this year, I really feel like my seeds are few, and those few are going to be very potent. And one of them is really focused on my vessel, this suit I'm sitting here in, and then the one that goes way beyond the suit that I'm sitting here in, and everything else. Then, in my work, in my relationships, if I come back to grace, if I come back to reverence for my own vessel and for nature, and the elements, that everything else kind of flows with ease and grace. It just happens. And I'm also open to possibility because even in the last day or two, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm doing this. I'm focusing on this, just a few seeds. And then, epiphanies and synchronicities and people reach out to me, and I have to be with, okay, maybe I will explore that one a little more. Maybe I am intrigued by that one. Maybe I don't have to have this finalized plan just yet, but to surrender and to be open to possibility. I recently read the surrender experiment, and while a little outlandish, I will say, his story is that he surrendered and said pretty much yes to whatever showed up in front of him. Now, was that overwhelming in some respects? Yeah. He had a lot of stuff going on. Michael Singer, that's what his name just dropped in. Um, and so sometimes I do, say no every once in a while to things. But the story in general was like just by, saying yes to what showed up and being experimental, he had some pretty magical things happen. He also had some pretty shadowy things happen throughout the story, but he surrendered to it all, which was pretty cool. So, anyway, that was all I had to drop in and say today and talk about, like, really, going back to the passage, is understanding that there are certain things we have to want to do in the world, or we want to do in the world, because in order to um, really bring the truest, highest level spiritual vision into form of your soul led vision, we have to, excuse me, do some things that are within our gifts and magic here on the earthly plane, and to make a difference in the world. So, start up the startup, write the book, paint the painting. But I might discourage you from doing it all at the same time, which I've tried to do so many times in my life and learn that lesson, that I can't start up the startup. I can't write the curriculum. I can't compose the book. Um, and I can't paint the paintings all at the same time, because then what happens is the amusement, the joy, and the fun, they kind of start to not be so fun anymore. And for me, again, that's another big theme for this year, a huge one. Whimsy, fun. Like I keep saying, are we having fun yet? Because even though there's serious stuff going out on in the world, there's serious stuff. I work with my shadows. I work with my client shadows, because guess what comes out of the shadows is the light and the gifts and the fun and the whimsy and all of that stuff. So we don't want to just say suck in the shadows or the seriousness, because the remedy to the pain that can sometimes be caused by the seriousness or the shadows is, not emerging out and having fun and being playful and embracing our children and loving all of those parts of ourselves into the whole being that we already are. So that's my seed work for the year. Really is just a continued remembrance of all of the parts and the loving of all of the parts, and everything else that kind of will flow from there. In that I trust. So have a wonderful week, and I will see you next week, probably talking about more of this ease and grace and awareness and acknowledgement, and the saying hell yes to the gifts and your personal genius. So have a good week, and I will see you later.